This is Module 2, Chapter 7, Leading the EMS Team. Please review this section and complete the assignment with a minimum score of 80%.
The objectives for this chapter include: describe leadership in routine situations, describe the leadership challenges related to the EMS station work environment, and describe the leadership challenges related to the volunteer EMS agencies. Leadership professor Gary Ewald defines leadership as the process by which a person influences others to understand and agree about what needs to be done and how to do it, and the process of facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish a shared objective. A person carries out this process by applying his or her leadership characteristics, and your position as an EMS officer gives you the authority to accomplish certain tasks and objectives in the agency. This power does not make you a leader, it simply makes you the supervisor. Your leadership attributes are based on your beliefs, your values, ethics, character, knowledge, and skills. These attributes are developed and established with time and experience. The position of EMS officer confers authority, but does not make a person a leader. Bosses tell people to accomplish a task. Leaders make people want to achieve goals and objectives. These leadership skills are acquired over time and with experience. At times, as an officer, you will make mistakes. This is part of the learning process to become a leader. Making mistakes will happen. Learning from them will make you a good leader. The EMS officer as a follower. Leaders can be effective only to the extent that others are willing to accept their leadership. An EMS officer has to be both a leader and a follower. As a follower, you learn and gain experiences that will help guide you as you become a leader. Let's take a moment to look at various leadership styles. The autocratic has an iron hand approach. It's used when an EMS officer needs to maintain high personal control of the group. An example would be at the scene of a major crash or an MCI. Another approach better suited for situations that do not need immediate action to take place is the democratic. This is a consultative type approach that is used when planning a project or developing a daily work plan. Specialized EMS agencies often use this approach when faced with an unusual emergency situation. Execution of the plan often involves an autocratic command style. Sometimes this is seen when several personnel get together to decide how to respond to a situation such as a cardiac arrest. Once a decision is made, the plan may be carried out using a more autocratic approach. Another style is the laissez-faire, more or less a free-rein style. It is effective when working with experienced EMS providers handling routine duties. This leadership style moves the decision-making from the EMS officer to the individual EMS provider. The EMS officer depends on the provider's good judgment and sense of responsibility to get things done within basic guidelines. This approach is an effective leadership style when working with experienced EMS providers and when handling routine duties that pose little personal hazard. Conversely, this approach is not effective with new or inexperienced providers or during hazardous situations. Next, we will discuss power and its effect on leadership. Power is the capacity of one party to influence another party. One of the first works on the management of power was The Prince, Niccolò Machiavelli's masterpiece, posthumously published in 1532. In their 1959 Studies of Social Power, French and Raven describe types of power as the result of the target person's response from the agent making a request. Legitimate power is the target person believes that the agent has the right to make the request and the target person had the obligation to comply. For example, under the incident management system, the incident commander has the legitimate power to reassign the triage group. There's reward power, where the target person complies to obtain rewards believed to be controlled by the agent. There's expert power, where the target person complies due to a belief that the agent has special knowledge. There's referent power, where the target complies due to admiration of or identification with the agent and seeks approval. And there's coercive power. The target person complies to avoid punishment believed to be controlled by this agent. Professor Gary A. Ewald from the University of Albany divided French and Raven's types into two categories: personal power, which includes expert and referent power, reflects the effectiveness of the individual. And then there's positional power in contract, is defined by the role an individual has within the organization. Legitimate, reward, and coercive power are the three examples of positional power. Ewald added two more position power descriptions: the information power, which is control over information. Unlike expert power, information power is based on the target person's assessment of the agent's ability to discover or obtain relevant information rapidly and effectively, usually through a cultivated network of resources. Ecological power, control over the physical environment, technology, or organization of work. The target person's behavior is based on perceptions of opportunities and constraints. Most EMS officer leadership activities are directed toward routine situations. This includes being well prepared to perform in emergency situations. The EMS officer accomplishes most of these goals and objectives through the efforts of crew or team members. The role of the officer involves influencing, operating, and improving to ensure that these efforts achieve the desired results. Unlike many years ago, today's workforce is much different. Today's employees demand to be included in the decision-making process. As a result, effective EMS officers use a participative form of leadership. The officer must have discretion regarding when, how, and by whom assignments are carried out. Some officers sit down with their crews at the start of the shift and cover the assignments. Others have meetings in the middle of the shift or towards the end of the shift to accomplish the same thing. A core responsibility of the EMS officer is to handle emergencies effectively. The EMS officer has direct leadership responsibility for his or her crew. The first arriving EMS officer of an incident may have additional important responsibilities to establish command and to provide direction to the rest of the responding units to that scene. The first arriving EMS officer also has leadership responsibilities that relate to the communication center. This includes giving a situation report and requesting additional resources. The EMS officer's primary responsibility is to the providers under his or her command and is responsible for their safety, their directions, and performance at the scene of an incident. The EMS officer should develop a consistent approach to emergency activities in which all of the department's operating procedures are followed. A pre-assignment. This allows the EMS officer to make fewer decisions during an emergency. For example, the driver of the ambulance will be responsible for establishing and maintaining an airway and then take vital signs. Assigning on the scene, however, reduces unnecessary efforts. Often the EMS officer uses a more autocratic style of leadership because the emergency scene does not allow for participative decision making. Dangerous situations can develop suddenly during incident operations. An autocratic leadership style is necessary when immediate action is required. The EMS officer may directly encounter a dangerous situation, such as a person with a gun or a careening vehicle. In such a case, you must make an immediate, clear, and autocratic command to protect the provider under your supervision by removing them from the danger area. Then you need to provide a CAN report giving the conditions, actions taken thus far, and need for additional resources. After every incident, the EMS officer should review the event while still at the scene or as soon as possible after returning to quarters. In many cases, ambulance crews will review calls at the hospital. This is an opportunity to clarify issues and answer questions. The EMS officer can reinforce good practices and immediately identify any unacceptable performance. The first arriving EMS officer at an incident describes the conditions and situation to dispatch. The content of this report must comply with departmental operating procedures or guidelines. This verbal picture establishes the tone for the incident so that others know what to expect upon arrival. The initial on-scene radio report is made up of the following elements: identification of the arriving unit, confirmation of proper location or updates of location if needed, a brief description of the incident or the current situation, brief description of action that is being taken or needs to be taken, declaration of the strategy to be followed, any obvious safety concerns, command identification and location as appropriate, and request additional or to release surplus resources. The first arriving EMS officer provides leadership and direction to responding units. The EMS officer must demonstrate the ability to take control of the situation and provide specific direction to arriving units, as well as allowing those units that are operating to carry out their specific task. To do so requires mastery of the autocratic style of leadership. The EMS officer works in a dynamic environment with challenging conditions and evolving organizational needs. The basic leadership concepts prevail when considering two unique challenges an EMS officer faces. The EMS station is a workstation or location. Most of the challenges faced by an officer are not at the scene of an emergency. Most of their skills are challenged dealing with personnel at the station. This is dealing with normal day-to-day activities and behaviors that occur in any work location. Leading a volunteer EMS agency. Leading an EMS agency may be a challenge. However, leading a volunteer agency has its own unique challenges. While volunteer members may not be receiving compensation for their work, their expectations and their role is the same. When a patient is in need of care, it does not matter if the provider is getting paid or not. The expectation is that the patient will receive the best possible care. In many areas, EMS providers work rotating shifts regularly and may even prepare and share meals together. There are days of dull routine, punctuated by episodes of intense excitement. These factors create a powerful and special community among EMS providers that is difficult to compare with other workplace environments. Providers think of their station as a home away from home. This workplace environment produces a special kind of bonding among workers, but it can produce productivity problems as well as behavioral and personality traits that are often quite challenging to deal with. Many situations can be quite different from the problems that occur in a normal work environment, and the behavioral issues are often more severe. The EMS officer must maintain order at all times. An EMS officer must balance the expectations of the employer with the realities of an EMS station work environment and the desire to create an effective team. A certain amount of spirited behavior can be healthy as long as basic rules are observed. The EMS officer has to maintain order and ensure that whatever occurs can be explained and would be acceptable to a rational observer. 2 general rules for non-emergency activities. Do not compromise the EMS agency's ability to respond to emergencies, and do not jeopardize the public's trust in that EMS agency. Responding to emergencies and preserving the public trust are 2 values that every EMS provider needs to demonstrate. And within those values, there is a wide latitude for team building and extracurricular activities. EMS officers leading volunteer EMS agencies have to rely on their leadership skills even more than their municipal counterparts do. The EMS officer must promote the satisfaction of every member and be alert for issues that could create a conflict. There are 4 phases of volunteer participation. There is a large loss of applicants during training. The candidates could not make the time commitment, were physically unprepared, or could not pass the cognitive certification exam. There's a small loss during the probationary period. During the first year after joining an agency, members are typically consistent participants in emergency and administrative duties. There is a moderate to high loss between the 3rd and 6th year of membership. Younger members are finishing college, getting married, having children, and building their careers. The ones who do not leave cannot devote as much time to the volunteer service as they once did. And then there's the 4th, which is a commitment or recommitment between the 15th and 18th year of membership. And those volunteer EMS providers who never left significantly increase their time with the agency, and many who left start returning. The children are grown, the career is established. This group forms the core of the volunteer EMS agency. Power does not make you a leader. It makes you a supervisor. As a supervisor, you are accountable for the actions of those you supervise. Effective leaders are good followers. In order to be a good leader, you need to have followed others who have been successful. 3 situational leadership styles are typically used: the autocratic, the democratic, and laissez-faire. Knowing when to use them and how to use them effectively will make you a good EMS officer. Types of power may be categorized using several different methods. Most EMS officer leadership activities is directed toward routine objectives. A core responsibility of an EMS officer is to handle emergencies effectively. An EMS officer must use the autocratic leadership style when immediate action is required. The first arriving unit needs to describe current conditions to dispatch. That information is provided initially to help set the tone for the incident. The EMS agency environment can produce productivity problems. Learning how to recognize and deal with them will make you a more successful officer. An EMS officer must balance the expectations of the employer with the realities of an EMS station work environment. Pride, group identity, and personal commitment are factors that help to keep volunteers active and loyal to your agency.